Hello to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. This is Why Evolution is Bullshit, Part 1, Understanding the Scientific Method. Evolution is the hypothesis posing as a theory that people believe as a fact. Many evolutionists / Darwinists seem to believe in evolution not based off of the scientific method, but based off of dogma. If one follows how the scientific method is supposed to operate, then one realizes very quickly that the theory of evolution is not sound science at all. One, the scientific method. What is the scientific method? Let's break it down. A. The scientific method is supposed to be an objective, unbiased way to discover phenomenon, prove ourselves what's factual, and to discover new things about the world around us. And I quote from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. The scientific method. Principles and procedures for the systematic pursuit of knowledge, involving the recognition and formulation of a problem, the collection of data through observation and experiments, and the formulation and testing of a hypothesis or hypotheses. From dictionary.com, a method of research in which a problem is identified, relevant data is gathered, a hypothesis is formulated from these data or from this data, and the hypothesis is empirically tested. B. The steps are as follows. Although it must be noted that many websites and web pages don't have the same number of steps, nor do they have the same naming of what the steps are. But I digress. According to a few sites, step 1 is to make an observation. Step 2 is to ask questions. Step 3 is to formulate a hypothesis. Step 4 is to develop a prediction. Although this right here is problematic. We'll get on this later. Step 5, gather data and then test the hypothesis. Once we get to this step, we're supposed to refine, alter, or reject the original hypothesis. Step 6 is you develop the theory. If we get to this step and the theory seems solid, it seems sound, then the other steps are supposed to repeat and the idea becomes more solid as factual over time. If the theory does not seem solid, if it doesn't seem very sound, then it is eventually rejected in the face of another more accurate theory. But there are some problems. 2. Defining terms. 2a. Observation. The act of careful watching and listening. The activity of paying close attention to someone or something in order to get information. Observations are a good start. In evolutionary theory, the observations seem to be that animals are very different from each other. B. Question. Question is defined as a doubt or an uncertainty about something. The question for evolution is, why are the animals so different from each other? C. Hypothesis. By this definition, a hypothesis is a tentative assumption made in order to draw out and test its logical or empirical consequences. The hypothesis is that animals slowly change over time due to their environmental stressors. If the environmental stresses for that particular bodily trait, the organism will slowly, generationally, produce more of that particular bodily trait to survive in that particular environment. Now, up to this point, everything in evolutionary theory seems fine. It's the next few steps where scientists tend to mess things up. D. Prediction is defined as to say that something will or might happen in the future. a statement about what will happen or might happen in the future. There shouldn't be a single prediction or even a few predictions. There should be as many as the previous observations will allow. So there should be as many different predictions that can be made based off the observation. Because the prediction, forecast, etc. can end up being very closed instead of very open. Because many make only one or a few predictions instead of many, so many of those other steps can now be filled with a bias that the scientist is not aware of. E. Data. Data is defined as the factual information as measurements or statistics used as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or calculation. Again, how objective is the data? F. Theory. Now I'm going to break this down very, very precisely. Theory. And also we'll link this and actually put the picture up on this part of the video when you're watching it. Here is the second definition from the simple definition on Merriam-Webster. A theory is defined as an idea that is suggested or presented as possibly true, but that has not known or been proven to be true. Here is the fourth and fifth definition from the full definition section on Merriam-Webster. The fourth definition reads, a belief, policy, or procedure proposed or followed as the basis of action, an ideal or hypothetical set of facts, principles, or circumstances. The fifth definition, a plausible or scientifically acceptable general principle of body of principles offered to explain phenomena. Now let's look at the full definition of the word plausible. Plausible is defined as superficially fair, reasonable, or valuable, but often specious. Now let's look at the simple definition section of the word for the definition of the word specious. Specious is described or defined as falsely appearing to be fair. Falsely appearing to be fair, just, or right. Appearing to be true, but actually false. That's very interesting. So let's break it down. What we have here with the word theory, when you look at all the definitions behind all the words in the definition of the word theory, a theory is something that is suggested, accepted as true, appears reasonable, but is not actually proven to be true at all. It's only true because a number of people believe it to be true based off of the superficial observations of reality. In other words, theory does not actually equal fact. Therefore, evolutionary theory does not equal evolutionary facts. Again, I'll provide links below so you can see for yourself. G. Unconscious bias. Unconscious bias is defined as a prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, place, or group, compared with another, usually in a way that's considered to be unfair. A prejudice for or against something that is usually practiced by someone who isn't aware of the prejudice that they're exerting. From fastcompany.com, and I quote, "We are so powerfully guided by things we expect to be true in the world," unquote, says Brian Well, Director of People Analytics at Google, in a video promoting the initiative. Many scientists unfortunately fall victim to that just as easily as all other people or non-scientists. H. Because of the prediction made earlier in the process itself stands a chance of losing a lot of objectivity. One shouldn't be making closed predictions. They should be making open-ended predictions, educated guesses, inferences, predictions that can go in multiple different directions. Multiple predictions about the phenomena based off of their earlier observations. The mistake made here is that after observing, asking questions, and forming a hypothesis, scientists and people tend to become more closed off to other possibilities, when in reality, the possibilities are still numerous even after completing these first 4 steps. So after you complete the first 4 steps of the scientific method, the possibilities should still be numerous. They shouldn't get condensed down or reduced. There should still be just as many possibilities as before. A lot of people fall into that trap though. Instead of saying, I predict this will happen, the scientist should be saying, based off of our earlier experiments and observations and data, A is most likely to happen, but B, C, and D could also happen. They're just less likely. That's what they should be doing, and it looks like they're not really doing that anymore. The first statement sets many people up for failure. It has too much confirmation bias tied directly into the wording. So when results don't match what they predicted, many scientists end up either ignoring what they doesn't match their prediction, singular, one prediction, or they end up skewing all observation in that direction afterward, even when it doesn't fit with that particular prediction whatsoever. Dogma is defined as a belief or set of beliefs that is accepted by the members of a group without being questioned or doubted or challenged. Dogmatic thinking is a very interesting thing. The one major problem with dogmatic thinking is this. If there are 12 different groups of people who believe that they are right about something, and that of the 12 groups, they're the only one that is right, the other 11 groups are wrong, they'll never see how each group is actually a little biased about whatever it is they're thinking. They'll recognize bias only in the other, but they'll never recognize the bias in themselves. Number 3, the 5 W's of evolution. Who? Evolution is most attributed, or the evolutionary theory is most attributed to Charles Darwin. What is it? What is the evolutionary theory? A possible explanation for how organic life originated and came to be so diverse on planet Earth. Where? Where was the theory most heavily pushed or published? Somewhere in England at the time of publication. When was this done? The original work by Charles Darwin was published on November 24th, 1859, and the book title was On the Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. Why? He, Darwin, apparently had been delaying publishing his work for many years. Why? He wanted to be as accurate as possible before publishing his work, but was prompted in the 1850s to get his work published more quickly by colleagues of his, such as the botanist Asa Gray, botanist Joseph Hooker, and biologist Thomas Huxley. How? It was officially published by Darwin, but also put into print by John Murray Publishers of London, England, in the year 1859. Number 4, what evolutionists and scientists have done. A, what they have done is they have gone backwards with the scientific method. Instead of making observations and allowing the evidence to lead them to the right conclusion, they've crammed everything they see into the theory of evolution, even if it doesn't make sense. Go back and look closely at step 4. Or go back early in this video and listen to what I said about the different steps in the scientific method, and see how everything at that point at step 4 has basically been stuck in confirmation bias for more than a century. Once one realizes that Darwin and others knew nothing about things like DNA, morphology, biochemistry, they didn't have a deep understanding of the fossil record, Darwin nor his friends who were paleontologists, and the next 160 years of science would actually end up showing flaws in the theory once they realized this. B. You have to accept that evolutionary theory is really evolutionism. It's become its own ideology based on a relatively shaky foundation. Hint, hint. Why is it every time someone challenges the theory of evolution, the pro-evolution types or evolutionists or Darwinists, they tend to become very, very aggressive. They seem to not show how evolution works. They just become very infuriated and they attack you and tell you you're stupid. They tell you that you're being idiotic. They don't really actually have an argument or a discussion with you about it. The problem for them is that science isn't based off of insults or ostracism. Science is based off of observations, facts, measurements, experiments, etc. All of which have failed to show and prove once and for all that evolution is indeed real. 5. What evolution is supposed to be. A. What is evolution? Evolution was supposed to be a process of organisms diversifying their genetics and their physiology by rejecting useless traits and adopting useful traits, passing on these useful traits to offspring, and doing so long enough to create different species of organism. Adaptation, speciation through natural selection. The theory of evolution is supposed to be accepted explanation or an accepted explanation as to what this process is and how it works. What has evolution turned into in the modern age? B. Evolutionists have in many ways become their own psychologically xenophobic, very aggressive, hyper-emotional ideology. They seem to want to stay in groups where no one questions evolution. They're very aggressive towards anyone that questions evolution. They seem to hold up Charles Darwin as a hero of some sorts, despite the fact many don't seem to actually be able to quote his work. They show many of the signs of being a dogma, an ideology, a following, etc. C. Why this change is very dangerous for the pursuit of knowledge and scientific inquiry. If we want to pursue actual knowledge, then we have to remain open-minded to our entire lives. We have to question everything. We always have to be willing to play devil's advocate and visualize a challenge against what we believe to be true. We have to avoid groupthink, and most importantly, we must do all these things in a response to everything we think is true for our entire lives. Too many of us stay stuck with an idea, and the longer we hold on to that idea, the less we're able to question it. And that is not a good thing for scientific inquiry. That's not a good thing if you want to gain knowledge. The longer people stay stuck with an idea, the harder it is for them to go against it or to question it. The longer they hold on to it, the less they're able to question it. That stifles thinking. That stifles critical thinking. That stifles objectivity. That stifles the human ability to learn and discover new things. In conclusion, the scientific method needs to be examined. It needs to be understood and put into practice at all times. If this is done correctly, we will only get more accurate when it comes to scientific discovery and learning about our world, learning about planet Earth and the universe as a whole. If we don't do this, we run the risk of becoming the religious dogmatics that many of us deride. We run the risk of becoming just as dogmatic and ideological as people we tend to make fun of. Unfortunately, evolutionists have already done this to a noticeable degree. They become nearly as ideological as religious people that they would then attack. We must also study what Darwin actually produced in his lifetime and look at him as a scientist. Look at him as a human being. Someone who may have been brilliant in his lifetime, but was still flawed. We need to avoid putting him and others on a pedestal. Science does not require pedestalization. It requires critical thinking. And when it comes to critical thinking, what that really means is that we must question all things. The idea that science is settled is a dangerous idea. Science never really should be all the way settled. Otherwise, you don't discover anything else. An idea that stifles the ability to question things that are around us, that's a dangerous idea. One thing that needs to be remembered, no matter how far you are along in this process, no matter how many steps you've taken so far in the scientific method, you have to accept the reality that at any point in time, your idea could be shown to be wrong. Most people do not do this, but more of us need to. In part 2, I'll break down the actual flaws in the evolutionary theory that more people need to think about. Until next time, I'm out. Peace.